And what is to mature is a temple dedicated to, quote unquote, Him. Again, this Him is not a literal personage or figure. This is the core wisdom within the scriptures. At this point in time, we're getting pieces of what that is, what that core philosophy is, as we go through these chapters, and as we're allowing these chapters to, inform and highlight some things to our experience. When we can allow the conversation's conscience to let what is being highlighted mesh with what is thought to be known or understood, well, then that's when a better grasp on that wisdom takes place. So giving our conversation to that experience, giving our conversation to that wisdom, giving our conversation to that understanding now of the devotional conversation as it's going through this experience, what is to develop is a temple, and this is something that this chapter highlights. This is supposed to be a temple developing for the spirit of the conversation's mind. And so what this chapter does is that it moves on from the construction of this temple to now putting into practice something that is often said, which is, if Christ is in you, the body is dead. If Christ is in you, the body is dead. Now, this is not a literal body that a literal figure is supposed to be in. This is the body of our belief that, quote unquote, Christ is supposed to be in. Now, that wisdom, has an epithet in the Bible called, in context, Christ. Christ is not a man. Christ is a philosophy. And the way that Paul uses this term, this is understood from how the author is articulating their position. This deadness is not literal deadness. This deadness is deadness to a prior experience of not understanding how to maintain self by that wisdom. And if this wisdom is in the conversation's temple, well, then deadness will then cause that conversation to shake and to tremble and to become aware of its own self, developing a level of consciousness it never had before. And this is what Paul calls our most reasonable service in the book of Romans. This is our most reasonable service. It is the most reasonable service because we are giving to our conversation the awareness that it needs in order for it to benefit us. In order for us to love ourselves better, because we are not simply a body of chemicals. There is another aspect to us that is mental and that is conscious. In order for us to understand and love ourselves better, we have to be able to have that level of consciousness attach itself to the missing link that is within us. The Bible's route to doing this is through allowing the devotional conversation to comprehend its state of mind and character and of being and experience. By doing so, it has given a wisdom, it has given Him to the conversation. Not a Him, again, as in reference to any mythological being, entity, any denominated figure. This Him, again, is a specific core philosophy within the scriptures. Giving our conversation this core philosophy and us exercising it, our conversation exercising it, well, then we can then present our conversation to the being within our humanity or to our human being for instruction. So this way, what we have received from experience is working and is recycling and is educating and re-educating while we are learning and unlearning who and what we are and are not. This is our most reasonable service because when giving to our conversations conscious or to the body of our belief, the ability for it to feel its own self, to know its own character, well, then every one of the members within our conversation, its heart, its brain, its sensibilities, its ability to rationalize, its ability to empathize, every one of the components to our conversation will develop a level of consciousness that will put our human being in check And that example, going from that experience, will allow our natural life to go through that same or a similar experience in its own way. The two finally being able to meet and to marry and to reason over the existence they have in the natural sphere and in the sphere of what is within. This is why the chapter is called The Spirit of His New Creature. Because a new creation is supposed to take place from first the creation of the devotional conversation. When that can, take place, when that is allowed to take place, well then, now we can move on in our experience to not simply being a creation, but learning how to maintain that. Learning how to be a creation. Go through the stage of being creation. Now we have to learn how to be a creation. And that's where things such as be in the world and not of the world are a part of that scheme. And that's where put off your former conversation, the old man or the old mind, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and put on the new mind or the new man, which is created. All of these things then take place when we can allow our conversation to pass through the stages of growth and development that it needs to, we stepping out of the way, so that it can personalize our human experience from its experience and from us going through that. There's a lot going on inside of this frame that we call human. And one way to, settle that is I have found in the Bible to be, decent and fair, is to get the structure of the devotional conversations conscience in line. Because once we can do that, sure, we're going to have struggles. Sure, life is going to be what it is. Sure, life is going to have no consideration for what we are or are going through, because life isn't programmed to do that. But what can balance all of that out is the government that is within while that's taking place outside of us. Getting that government within and being able to find contentment with that government enough to educate and to allow it to re-educate its own self. That's where we can then pick and choose our battles for what's outside of us. And that's where a higher level of awareness takes place, to where we can reach that rung on that ladder of Peter, that very top of charity. But we got to start at the bottom. And that bottom rung is a rung of creation, where you are adding and you are adding and you are adding to the point where what you have added can then benefit in love. So this is a full process of creation for a creature. And again, this creature is not you, the human being, initially or primarily. This creature is the creature of belief. This is the creature of profession. Once this can take place, and once the human being can rationalize that experience and step outside of it and let it have its own experience, well, then a new creature is born. And then within that new creature is housed a temple for the mind that is under construction. And this mind under construction, just as the old tabernacle communed with what was outside of it and above it, so too the temple that is within, that is under construction, must commune with what is outside of it and above it. And what is outside of it and above it in the same context of what is within. There is no flesh within, there is only flesh without. We must commune, our conversation must commune with what is of likeness to it. And one, because we can only do this through words, it means that it's mental. And being mental, the experience is without any sort of physical deed, any sort of physical act. That's the growth of that new creature. And if that can be maintained, then skyrocketing for the body of our belief.